When my mother-in-law called to uninvite me from Thanksgiving dinner with a smugness that made my skin crawl, she had no idea she was about to hand me the perfect opportunity to expose her family's darkest secrets. What happened next turned their traditional gathering into a night no one would ever forget. My name is Scarlett, and 3 years ago, I thought I was marrying into the perfect American family. The Hawthornes of Greenwich, Connecticut, with their sprawling colonial home, their old money heritage, and their picture-perfect holiday traditions that looked like something straight out of a lifestyle magazine. What I didn't realize was that behind those perfectly polished facades lay secrets so explosive they could destroy everything the family had built over generations. Before we begin this journey together, I want to take a moment to acknowledge something. If you've ever felt like an outsider in your own family, if you've ever been made to feel like you don't belong, this story is for you. Sometimes the most powerful moments come not from fitting in, but from having the courage to stand up and demand the respect we deserve. Hit subscribe to join our community of women who believe in speaking our truth, no matter how uncomfortable it makes others. Now, let's dive into a Thanksgiving that changed everything. It started on a crisp October morning when my phone rang. I was in my home office, working on a marketing campaign for my boutique consulting firm that I'd built from scratch after graduating with my MBA. The caller ID showed Barbara Hawthorne, and immediately my stomach tightened. My mother-in-law never called unless she wanted something or had a complaint. "Scarlett, darling." Barbara's voice dripped with false sweetness. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." The way she said important made it clear she didn't consider my work particularly significant, despite the fact that my business was thriving while her son Marcus struggled to keep his position at his father's law firm. "Not at all, Barbara. What can I do for you?" I kept my voice pleasant, though every fiber of my being was on alert. "Well, I've been doing some thinking about Thanksgiving this year." She paused dramatically, and I could practically hear her savoring what came next. "Given everything that's been happening with the family dynamics lately, I think it might be best if you sat this one out. You know, let us have some quality family time without any complications." The words hit me like a physical blow. Complications. That's what I was to her, a complication. Not her daughter-in-law of 3 years. Not the woman who'd supported Marcus through his career struggles. Not the person who'd spent countless hours helping plan and execute their precious family gatherings. A complication. "I'm not sure I understand," I said, though I understood perfectly. This was Barbara's latest power play in her ongoing campaign to make me feel unwelcome in the family I'd married into. "Oh, don't make this more difficult than it needs to be," she sighed with exaggerated patience. "It's just that Patricia and James are coming with the grandchildren, and you know how Marcus gets around his sister. He becomes so tense when you're both there. It would just be easier for everyone if we kept it simple this year." Patricia, Marcus's golden child sister, who could do no wrong in Barbara's eyes, despite being a documented mess who'd been through 3 failed marriages and had a drinking problem that the family pretended didn't exist. But somehow, I was the one causing tension. "Have you discussed this with Marcus?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Marcus understands the situation," Barbara replied smoothly. "He agrees it's for the best. You can have a lovely, quiet Thanksgiving at home. Maybe order some takeout. I'm sure you'll find something to occupy your time." The dismissiveness in her tone was the final straw. For 3 years, I'd tried to be the perfect daughter-in-law. I'd bitten my tongue when Barbara criticized everything from my career to my cooking to my choice not to have children immediately. I'd smiled through countless passive-aggressive comments about my middle-class background, my state school education, and my lack of breeding. I'd pretended not to notice when she conveniently forgot to include me in family photos or when she introduced me to her friends as Marcus's wife, without bothering to mention my name. "Well," I said, my voice steady despite the fury building inside me, "if that's how the family feels, then I suppose that's that." "I'm so glad you understand," Barbara gushed, clearly thrilled by what she perceived as my capitulation. "Sometimes these decisions are hard, but they're necessary for family harmony." After I hung up, I sat in my office chair, staring at my phone. 3 years of marriage, and this was where we'd ended up. My own husband had agreed to exclude me from Thanksgiving without even having the courtesy to discuss it with me first. The betrayal cut deeper than any of Barbara's previous slights. When Marcus came home that evening, I was in the kitchen preparing dinner, moving through the motions automatically while my mind raced. He walked in with his usual distracted air, loosening his tie and checking his phone. "How was your day?" he asked absently. Already reaching for the bourbon, he kept on the kitchen counter. "Interesting," I replied, not looking up from the vegetables I was chopping. "Your mother called." His hand froze halfway to the bottle.
"Oh, right."
"About Thanksgiving." "About Thanksgiving," I repeated. "Were you planning to mention this decision to me at some point, or was I supposed to just figure it out when I didn't receive an invitation?" Marcus poured himself a generous measure of bourbon before turning to face me. "Look, Scarlett, it's complicated. Patricia's going through a rough patch with the divorce, and the kids are struggling. Mom thought it might be easier if we kept things simple this year." "Simple," I said, finally meeting his eyes. "And where exactly do I fit into this simple family gathering?" He had the grace to look uncomfortable. "You could visit your parents. They'd love to see you." My parents, who lived in a modest ranch house in Ohio and had never made me feel like I wasn't enough exactly as I was. My parents, who'd raised me to believe that family meant unconditional love and support, not conditional acceptance based on how well you performed your assigned role. "So let me get this straight," I said, setting down my knife with deliberate care. "Your sister, who's currently on her third divorce, who gets falling down drunk at every family gathering, who screams at her children in front of everyone, she gets to come to Thanksgiving. But me, your wife, who has never caused a single scene or created any drama whatsoever, I'm the one who needs to stay home for the sake of family harmony." "It's not about you personally," Marcus said, taking a large sip of his drink. "It's just, Patricia needs support right now." "And what do I need, Marcus?" The question hung in the air between us. He stared at me, seemingly genuinely puzzled by the concept that I might have needs that deserved consideration. That night, lying in bed next to my husband who was pretending to sleep, I made a decision. If the Hawthorne family wanted to treat me like an outsider, then perhaps it was time I started acting like one. And outsiders, I realized, had certain advantages. They saw things that insiders preferred to ignore. The next morning, I called in a favor for my college roommate Jessica, who now worked as an investigative journalist for a major newspaper. Over coffee at our favorite cafe in the city, I told her about the Thanksgiving situation. "That's absolutely horrible," Jessica said, her reporter instincts immediately kicking in. "But you know what? Sometimes the best revenge is just living well. Don't give them the satisfaction of seeing you hurt." "Oh, I don't plan to," I said, stirring my latte thoughtfully. "In fact, I've been thinking about doing some research into the Hawthorne family history. Really getting to know my in-laws better." Jessica raised an eyebrow. "What kind of research?" "The kind you're good at," I said with a smile. "Public records, business filings, that sort of thing. I'm particularly interested in Hawthorne and Associates' client list and any recent legal troubles they might have had." Over the next 3 weeks, Jessica and I dove deep into the Hawthorne family's affairs. What we found was even more explosive than I'd hoped. Richard Hawthorne's prestigious law firm was facing a major embezzlement scandal that had somehow been kept out of the press. One of their longtime clients had discovered that nearly $2 million had been systematically stolen from their trust fund over a 5-year period. The investigation was ongoing, but early evidence pointed directly to Richard himself. But that wasn't all. Patricia's messy divorce had revealed some interesting details about the family's finances. Her ex-husband's attorney had subpoenaed records showing that the Hawthornes had been living far beyond their means for years, taking out massive loans against their house and Richard's partnership in the firm. They were essentially broke, maintaining their lifestyle through increasingly desperate financial maneuvers. And then there was the most delicious discovery of all. Barbara's precious charity work, which she never stopped bragging about, involved a foundation that existed primarily on paper. The Hawthorne Foundation for Children's Education had raised over $500,000 in donations over the past 3 years, but less than 10% had actually gone to any charitable causes. The rest had been funneled back to the family through administrative costs and consulting fees. As Thanksgiving approached, I finalized my plans. I would indeed be attending the Hawthorne family gathering, just not in the way they expected. Thanksgiving morning dawned crisp and clear. I spent the morning getting ready with the care of a general preparing for battle. I chose my outfit carefully, a stunning emerald green dress that brought out my eyes, paired with the diamond earrings Marcus had given me for our first anniversary. I wanted to look absolutely radiant when I made my entrance. At exactly 6:30 p.m., the traditional start time for Hawthorne family gatherings, I pulled into the circular driveway of Barbara and Richard's Georgian mansion. The house was blazing with warm light, and through the windows, I could see the family gathered in the formal living room, cocktails in hand, probably congratulating themselves on how peaceful their Thanksgiving was without me. I sat in my car for a moment, checking my phone one last time. Jessica had delivered everything perfectly. The story would run in tomorrow's newspaper, but I had advance copies of the article that would expose the Hawthorne Foundation scandal. I also had printouts of all the financial documents we'd uncovered, organized in neat folders with Richard's and Barbara's names on them. I grabbed my purse and the manila envelope containing my carefully prepared materials, took a deep breath, and walked to the front door. Instead of using my key, which I was sure they'd assumed I would never have the nerve to use, I rang the doorbell. The sound of footsteps approached, and the door swung open to reveal Patricia, already slightly flushed from wine, her blonde hair perfectly styled in a way that probably took her hairdresser 2 hours to achieve. "Scarlett," she gasped, her martini nearly slipping from her manicured fingers. "What are you doing here?" "Why, I'm here for Thanksgiving dinner," I said with my brightest smile. "I hope I'm not late, but Mother said, we thought. Marcus said you weren't coming." "Plans change," I said, stepping past her into the marble foyer. "You know how it is." The sound of voices from the living room had died away, replaced by an ominous silence. I could hear Barbara's heels clicking rapidly across the hardwood floor as she rushed to investigate the disturbance. "Scarlett." Barbara appeared in the doorway, her face a mask of barely controlled fury. She was wearing her signature pearls and a navy blue dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. "What a surprise." "Hello, Barbara," I said pleasantly. "You look lovely. I hope you don't mind that I decided to join you after all." I realized I simply couldn't miss spending Thanksgiving with my family. The way I emphasized the word family made Barbara's eye twitch slightly. Behind her, I could see Richard and Marcus approaching, both looking like they'd rather be anywhere else in the world. "Scarlett," Marcus said, his voice strained, "we discussed this. You were supposed to go to your parents. And Miss Barbara's famous turkey?" I laughed lightly. I wouldn't dream of it. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Barbara's 2 granddaughters, Patricia's kids aged 8 and 10, peered around their grandfather curiously, sensing the adult drama, but not understanding it. "Well," Barbara said through gritted teeth, "I suppose we'll need to set another place at the table." "How thoughtful," I replied. "But first, I brought something to share with everyone. A little Thanksgiving surprise." I opened my purse and pulled out the manila envelope, holding it casually at my side. "I've been doing some genealogy research lately, trying to learn more about the Hawthorne family history. You know how important family heritage is to you, Barbara." Richard's face had gone pale. As a lawyer, he recognized the look of someone holding damaging documents. "Perhaps we should move this conversation to the dining room," he suggested, clearly hoping to control whatever was about to happen. "Wonderful idea," I agreed. We processed into the formal dining room like a funeral march. The table was set with Barbara's finest china, crystal glasses catching the light from the chandelier, everything perfect for what was supposed to be their intimate family celebration. I took a seat at the place that had been hastily set for me, right between Marcus and his father. "So," I said, opening my envelope with deliberate ceremony, "I thought you'd all be interested in what I discovered about our family's recent activities." I pulled out the first document, a copy of a newspaper article that would run tomorrow morning. The headline read, "Prominent Greenwich Family Under Investigation for Charity Fraud." Barbara's gasp was audible. Richard reached for his water glass with a shaking hand. "It's quite fascinating reading," I continued conversationally. "Apparently, the Hawthorne Foundation for Children's Education has been rather creative with their accounting practices. Did you know that in the past 3 years, you've raised over $500,000 for children's education?" "Scarlett," Marcus warned, but I ignored him. "Of course, only about 40,000 of that actually went to any educational causes. The rest seems to have disappeared into administrative costs." I looked directly at Barbara. "I had no idea your administrative skills were worth over $400,000, Barbara. That's quite impressive." Patricia was staring at her mother in confusion. "Mom, what is she talking about?" I pulled out another document. "And then there's the fascinating case of the Pemberton Trust. $2 million missing over 5 years. I turned to Richard. "That must have been quite a challenging case to handle, especially since you were the one managing their account." Richard stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "This is completely inappropriate. These are private family matters." "Are they?" I asked innocently. "Because I'm pretty sure embezzling client funds and charity fraud are actually public matters. In fact, I believe the district attorney's office would be very interested in these documents." The room erupted in chaos. Patricia started crying, demanding to know what was happening. Her daughters looked frightened by the adult shouting. Barbara was frantically trying to grab the papers from my hands while maintaining some semblance of dignity. Marcus was alternating between trying to calm everyone down and shooting me looks of pure fury. "How could you do this?"
Barbara hissed at me.
"This is our home. This is Thanksgiving." I stood up slowly, gathering my papers with calm precision. "You're absolutely right, Barbara. This is Thanksgiving. A time for family. A time for gratitude. A time for reflection on what really matters." I looked around the table at each of them. "I'm grateful that I finally see this family for what it really is. I'm grateful that you uninvited me from tonight because it gave me the time to do this research. And I'm grateful that I no longer have to pretend that your approval means anything to me." Marcus reached for my arm. "Scarlett, please. We can talk about this privately." I pulled away from his touch. "We had 3 years to talk about things privately, Marcus. 3 years where you could have stood up for me, supported me, treated me like an actual member of this family. Instead, you let them exclude me from Thanksgiving because it was easier than dealing with your mother's disapproval." I turned back to Barbara, who was clutching her pearls like a lifeline. "You wanted me gone from your family gathering? Congratulations. You got your wish. But I thought I should give you all something to be truly thankful for this year, the truth." I placed copies of all the documents on the table, spreading them out like a macabre centerpiece among the fine china and crystal. "These copies are yours to keep," I said pleasantly. "I have plenty more. In fact, the district attorney already has a full set, along with all the supporting evidence. I thought it only fair that you should know what you'll be dealing with in the coming weeks." The silence that followed was deafening. Even Patricia's children had stopped fidgeting, sensing that something monumentally important was happening. "You vindictive little bitch," Barbara finally whispered, her carefully maintained composure cracking completely. I smiled, feeling a strange sense of peace wash over me.
"No, Barbara."
"I'm not vindictive. I'm just done. Done pretending that your cruelty is acceptable. Done allowing you to treat me like I'm beneath you. Done enabling your family's lies and corruption." I picked up my purse and headed toward the dining room door. Oh, and Marcus? I've already moved my things out of the house. You'll find the divorce papers on your desk at home, along with all the evidence of your family's financial crimes. I figured you'd want time to prepare your legal defense. As I reached the doorway, I turned back one last time. For what it's worth, the turkey smells wonderful, Barbara. I hope you all enjoy your last Thanksgiving dinner in this house. Something tells me next year's celebration will be much more modest. I walked out of that house with my head held high, leaving behind the sound of arguing voices and Barbara's hysterical sobbing. As I got into my car, I could see them through the dining room windows, the perfect Hawthorne family finally showing their true colors. The drive home to my new apartment was peaceful. I'd rented a beautiful place overlooking the harbor, paid for with the profits from my thriving business. No family money, no trust funds, no stolen charity donations, just honest work and my own determination. My phone started ringing almost immediately. First Marcus, then Richard, then even Patricia. I let them all go to voicemail. There would be time for conversations later, probably with lawyers present. 3 months later, the Hawthorne family's world had completely collapsed. Richard was facing federal charges for embezzlement and tax evasion. Barbara had been arrested for charity fraud and money laundering. The family house had been seized as part of the federal investigation, along with most of their assets. Marcus tried to reconcile, claiming he'd had no knowledge of his parents' crimes. But by then I'd moved on. I was dating again a wonderful man who introduced me to his family on our 3rd date and whose mother hugged me like I was already her daughter. Patricia, surprisingly, reached out to me after the arrests. She was finally getting sober and wanted to apologize for her part in the family's treatment of me. We met for coffee, and she told me something that stayed with me. "You know what the saddest part is?" she said, stirring her latte with shaking hands. "If they had just treated you with basic respect, none of this would have happened. They created their own worst nightmare by trying to push you out." She was right. If Barbara hadn't banned me from Thanksgiving, I never would have had the time or motivation to investigate their affairs. If they had simply accepted me as part of the family, I would have continued to ignore their flaws and maintain their secrets. A year after that explosive Thanksgiving dinner, I was featured in a business magazine as one of the city's most successful young entrepreneurs. The article mentioned my recent divorce, but focused on my professional achievements and my advocacy work for financial literacy education. I kept one memento from my marriage, a photo from our wedding day, where I'm laughing at something Marcus said, my face radiant with joy and hope. Not because I missed him, but because it reminded me of who I was before I let others define my worth. On Thanksgiving this year, I hosted dinner for the first time in my new apartment. My parents came, along with my brother and his family, plus several friends who had become chosen family over the years. We sat around my modest dining table, sharing stories and laughter, each person valued and welcomed exactly as they were. As I carved the turkey, which turned out perfectly, despite Barbara's passive-aggressive comments about my cooking skills years earlier, I thought about that night in Greenwich. The Hawthornes had tried to exclude me from their family, but in doing so, they'd freed me to create something better. Before we ate, we went around the table sharing what we were grateful for. When it was my turn, I raised my wine glass and looked at the faces of people who truly loved me. "I'm grateful," I said, "for every person who ever tried to make me feel small, because they taught me exactly how strong I really am. I'm grateful for every door that was slammed in my face, because it forced me to build my own. And I'm grateful for every family that rejected me, because it led me to the family that chooses me every day." The table erupted in cheers and applause. My mother wiped tears from her eyes. My father beamed with pride. Later, as I was clearing dishes, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was Patricia. "Saw your magazine article. You look happy. I'm glad you got out when you did. Happy Thanksgiving." I smiled and deleted the message. The past was truly behind me now. That night, as I sat on my balcony overlooking the harbor, wrapped in a soft blanket and sipping hot chocolate, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. The woman who had walked into the Hawthorne house that Thanksgiving night was different from the one who had walked out. She was stronger, clearer about her worth, and absolutely unwilling to accept crumbs from anyone's table. The Hawthorns had thought they were punishing me by excluding me from their gathering. Instead, they had given me the greatest gift possible, the gift of seeing myself clearly, separate from their approval or disapproval. I pulled out my laptop and began typing. Not a business proposal or marketing strategy this time, but the beginning of a book. A memoir about finding your voice, setting boundaries, and refusing to shrink yourself to fit into spaces that were never meant for you. The title came to me immediately. Uninvited: How Being Excluded from Thanksgiving Saved My Life. As I wrote, I thought about all the women who might read it someday. Women who were currently accepting treatment they didn't deserve, who were diminishing themselves to keep peace in toxic relationships, who were waiting for permission to claim their own worth. I wanted them to know what I had learned, that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to walk away from people who refuse to see your value. That your worth is not determined by others' ability to recognize it. That being uninvited from the wrong table means you're free to find the right one. The moon cast a silver path across the water, and I felt a deep sense of contentment wash over me. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new adventures. But tonight, I was exactly where I belonged, in a life I had built myself, surrounded by people who celebrated rather than merely tolerated my presence. The Hawthorns had tried to write me out of their story. Instead, they had given me the perfect beginning for my own.